We're still waiting for a couple more minutes or another. Yeah. Jill, do you want to do your introduction and then we'll get moving on?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our latest online virtual offering in this time of COVID. Thank you for staying along with us in our journey and helping us meet our mission to preserve and share the keys with the community locally and virtually. Just a couple things. If you are new to Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, well, if you just tap on your screen anywhere, the bottom icons will come up and you'll see the mute button that will likely be red because we have muted everybody to start.
Jill, you muted yourself by accident.
Oh, I did mute myself. I'm sorry. So you can also on the bottom, you can see the participants if you're interested. And then on where there's three little dots, it says more. If you tap on that, that's where you can raise your hand to ask a question, or you can chat and type in something to, I guess, Aaron, or Aaron, I guess it would be Brad. Brad, he could read it from the screen. So you can chat on like a text message with Brad and he can read the screen, or you can raise your hand to ask a question and Brad will see that on the big monitor with his, with the little blue hand raised. With that, hopefully no one has any questions. We will get started and hand it over to Brad.
All right, well, thanks for everybody who's logged in and is logging in. So if anybody wants to raise their hand or type in a question, I'd be happy to. Oh, yeah, or unmute yourself and you can ask your question and I'll do my best to answer everything that I can. Joe, do you have a question you want to start with? Joe, you need to unmute yourself first.
How's the weather in Florida? It's cool in California.
Oh, where in California are you?
Just outside San Francisco. I'm a frequent Keys visitor when the coronavirus permits, which I hope it's going to by June. I've got a plane ticket anyway. We'll see.
Well, it's hot here.
I know. It's too late. I wanted to go earlier, but no luck.
And I'm from Huntington Beach, by the way.
Oh, good.
So what's your question today?
I have no question. I'm just here to listen and
right.
Appreciate being here. Thank you.
Glad to have you on. Robin, I know you had a question and I don't see your face anymore. There you are.
I really don't want to show my face, but here I am.
Okay.
I just took a shower. My hair's wet. I have my reading glasses on, no makeup. So we were fishing today. So I did send in a question. Did you get it?
I did, and I don't have an answer for you. I know that a group of Robin asked if about the 1960 Hurricane Donna, and there used to be a lighthouse structure out in front of the
Chesapeake Restaurant.
Yeah, the Chesapeake Restaurant, and it was and during Hurricane Donna, several people actually rode the storm out inside that structure. I've never talked to the owner. I don't know. I know when it was torn down, just in the last 3 or 4 years,
right?
It was falling apart, and it was
hazardous.
Yeah, I want to use the phrase paper mache. It just kind of crumbled, but I'm not sure. I don't have that story.
I know I'm asking such like really obscure questions.
Well, sometimes I have those, sometimes I don't.
Yeah, well, and it's just because I am trying to write another novella, and it takes place inside the lighthouse during Hurricane Donna. And so I've been looking for information on maybe how it was laid out inside so that I can be a little more accurate in my writing. And I can't find any information as to, was it just a spiral staircase? Was it several levels? You know, I know it was a functioning lighthouse. It could function as a lighthouse, but they didn't use it as a lighthouse,
I
obviously.
think it was more decorative than it was. It was just out on the side of the road. I'm not sure it was functional. I think
I
it was
read
just.
that somewhere, believe it or not. I read it now. I could be wrong. I read it, but so I was just trying to get an idea of anybody, if you'd ever heard, because you are the Keys history expert, if you'd ever had anybody describe the inside, which is very obscure, as I said.
Well, the good news is that there are a host of people who are. I can do one Facebook post on that, and we'll get a ton of answers for you. So
That would be
that'll be easy.
That would be awesome. Very good. And I won't give away what else is in the book. I think I might have done that on my Facebook, my author's page, but it's a very difficult plot to write. So I'm trying. I want to know about your book, your Indian Key book. That's my question.
I'm working on a book that is supposed to be about Indian Key. It turns out that story is much too large. And Indian Key is only a major character in a much broader story of the history of the Florida Keys and wrecking.
Right.
And so Indian Key is turning out. I turned it into a bunch of it to my publisher, and she was asking why she had read so little about Indian Key in the first 80 pages, which got me to thinking a great deal about what is. So I'm still working on I know what the story is, and Indian Key is it does tell the entire history of Indian Key, but there is so much more to talk about. So it'll be a pretty significant in terms of pages and word count. Pretty significant.
Wonderful. I look forward to reading it.
Thank you, Robin. Ellen, are you with? I know Ellen had a question.
Yes. Well, I'm sitting here with my husband, who has been down here since 1979, and talking about that lighthouse, he recalls that there was a platform up, and that the couple that lived there, that owned it, that was the Chesapeake, and they also owned Whale Harbor, that they crawled up in on top of that platform, and during the hurricane they kept indicating the water level. So they had the height of the water whatever, you know.
Right.
Doing that on a regular basis. They were putting that in. And Glory Ann, who owned it at that time, she is still alive, and she is in a nursing home. So it might be interesting to get in touch with her.
Excellent. I know that the watermark inside the lighthouse, you can see where how high the water rose inside the lighthouse. I know that mark was left behind.
Yeah. Brad, I had sent you 2 questions yesterday because we finally got around to watching your Indian Key. Number 1, have you actually seen the fairy grotto that they talked about in there that Houseman took his daughter to? And then number 2, or was that Dr. Perrine maybe that took his daughter? And my other question is, could you tell us a little bit about how Houseman died? Because I don't think he lasted too long in Key West.
He did not. The first part of your question about the fairy grotto, it's been described by Perrine and Perrine's son in their memoirs about a mile from the end of Lower Matacumbe. It's about a mile from where you feed the tarpon at Robbie's down, and there were 3 water sources in Lower Matacumbe Key that I've come across. There were 5 freshwater wells in what's today the parking lot at Robbie's. There was another one closer to the Atlantic shoreline, and then the fairy grotto. And I have wandered back in the woods, in the hammock back there, and there is a large depression. All the fresh water has long since disappeared, and that could have been the site. It's not. I'm not for sure, because it looks nothing like it's been described. I mean, it's described as with the ferns and the colorful air plants and all of the overhanging bushes and trees. But it's long evaporated and disappeared, and no one knows where it really was. And the second part of your question, what happened to Mr. Hausman after the Indian attack on August 7th? Shortly thereafter, he and his wife and several of the slaves moved back to Key West, and he ended up working as a wrecker. And in May of the following year, in 1841, he was out working on a ship, working on a salvage operation, and he was trying to go from ship A to ship B during rough waters. And as he went from ship A to ship B, the two hulls collided, and he was trapped between it and was crushed to death. So, and that was, I can't think of the date off the top of my head, May something 1841. And then afterwards, the story is that his wife brought his body back to Indian Key and interred him on the island. And there was a large 8-foot marble slab that talks about Hausman, born, died, to all men he was kind or faithful, or I can't remember off the top of my head. That was on Indian Key, and there are pictures of that on Indian Key. The tombstone itself was shattered into like 27 pieces over the course of time as treasure hunters and other people were looking for trinkets and treasure and things and artifacts on the island. It's been, for the last 25 years, it's been on Lignum Key. And the park did contact us at the Discovery Center, and we are planning to have that tombstone brought here to the Keys History Discovery Center and created into a really cool exhibit. And that will come as we progress with after this craziness is over.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Hey, and by the way, don't you think that Blake, a little pre-mustache, looked a little bit like John Jacob Hausman?
I was thinking more 1970s something, but
I think Blake looked a little like him. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Gail, do you have a question? Oh, she typed it. Okay. Can you tell us how and when the center was started? When did the fund, where did it come from? Where and who actually owns it? The Discovery Center really comes into a part 1 and part 2. Gail is asking how the Keys History Discovery Center began, who started it, and where the funding comes from, and who actually owns the Discovery Center. It was started, I'm not sure when it was actually started with the initial group that formed. There was a falling out that had to be so reorganized. And I know that my time with the Discovery Center comes back to 2013. I was actually the first person employed by the board of directors to begin creating the exhibits and such. And then Jill was brought on shortly thereafter. So it was Jill and I being the full show in terms of creating the exhibits and fundraising and developing the Discovery Center that we see today. We have Erin Muir was brought on a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, and she is our third employee. And we're thrilled to have. Because we have a unique team with a lot of different talents and a lot of different skill sets, and we all work together very well. We fill a lot of the gaps. As far as funding goes, we are a 501c3 non-for-profit, so all the funding comes from people like you who help us, who donate to our cause. We do get funding from the TDC when we have an exhibit to create for bricks and mortars exhibits and things, and that's generally a matching grant. And as for who owns the Keys History Discovery Center, we are run by the Florida Keys History and Discovery Foundation. David Curry, who owns the property of the Islander, he's the one who physically built the structure and leased it to us for $1 a year for decades, which is awesome. So under contract, we run this facility. He owns the physical building. We operate the Keys. Our board of directors operates the Florida Keys History and Discovery Foundation, which runs the Keys History and Discovery Center. Hope that answers your question. Christina Clark, do you have a question you want to ask or type in? Yeah, she's big. Yes, very supportive. We love all our volunteers. Phyllis, are you still? Are you? Oh, Chris is lurking. All right.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Phyllis, loud and clear.
I don't have a camera on my computer, so that's my excuse. I have always been interested in housemen. These guys have had the salvaging business with which is open to a lot of possibilities of corruption, so to speak. Do you know anything about his personality? What was he an upstanding man? The occupation he held makes me suspect.
Well, there's Hausman's personality. Now, the wrecking industry as a whole was not really the piratical nature that people really talked about. In order to be a wrecker, you had to have and this is in terms of, let's say 1825, when the first wrecking laws really went on record. And you had to have a license to be a wrecker. You had to have, there are certain criteria you had to meet. You had to salvage. Your boat had to be in order. You had to, have a well-maintained boat, well-maintained crew. But there's always a bad apple. Not every used car salesman's horrible. Not every lawyer is a bad guy. But there's always a bad apple. And Hausman, you hear a lot of stories about about the wreckers being not such great guys. And Hausman is definitely played a part in creating that image of the wreckers. I know his wife loved him and thought that he was a great guy. I know people in Key West did not have that same opinion of him. But you have to give credit to Hausman for the things that he was able to accomplish. He was the kind of man who had a plan and got things done. He could really, he could set an agenda and he could follow through with it, so he was the kind of guy who had follow through. He was, I believe Charles Howe, who was a resident of Indian Key at that time, referred to him as, the word comes to mind as swarmy, but that's not the schemy. Schemy was the word that he used to describe Hausman. And Hausman was after money and wanted to do things for himself. And he did, one of his problems was that if there was a salvage operation that was north of Indian Key, after working that salvage operation, he would, on his way to report that claim in Key West, he had a habit of stopping at Indian Key and kind of offloading a portion of that salvage claim.
Uh-huh.
But he and again, he was super willing to. He owned the general store. I'm not sure he ran it on a day-to-day basis, but he was more than willing to give you house credit if you needed supplies, and if you couldn't pay him back, he was more than willing to take half interest in your house or more if you couldn't pay it back, which is one of the ways that he gained such a large ownership over so many properties on the island. So people in Key West hated him by and large. He didn't have a lot of friends on Indian Key and in the general area. He had a bad reputation. His wife Mrs. Perrine felt his wife was a bad character and wouldn't let her family, her sons and daughter, mix with her, or probably hasn't either. So he was definitely the kind of guy who would fit in well with the the black sheep or the bad apples of the used car and lawyer trade, if that helps to answer your question.
Yeah, yeah.
But you also have to give him credit for what he did. You know, he was the Islamorada or the Upper Keys' very first land developer. He invested over $200,000 of his own money trying to build this little empire, which he successfully did until, first the Seminole War cut into his expenses because he wasn't trading as much, and people were not stopping in the Upper Keys. And then he got selfish, and he got greedy and lost his wrecking license, so he was no longer able to act as a wrecker. So there was, he had his strong points, and he had his very publicly recorded weak points.
Those cabins on the island, were those slave cabins?
They're if you go back and look at most of the people on Indian Key had slaves. There were several smaller cottages that were 2-room cottages that had a separate building behind them. If you looked at our model downstairs, which is
Right.
thing, and there's always one small house, one small building behind each cottage. And those, if there's just one small cottage or one small structure, that was the kitchen facility. Several of the homes owned by Howe, owned by Hausman, owned by Senator William English, all had multiple slave dwellings behind their house. But I found documents of all the slaves on the island. If you look at the last names, which were often the same names of
The owners. Yeah.
Pretty much everyone on the island had at least one or two slaves working for them. House help, servants. I don't know if I want to call them slaves, but.
What was the population at the height of
In excess of 140 people.
140?
Yeah, which is pretty impressive for such a small island. But you walk out there today, and if there's a group of 10 or 20 out there, you can feel those people out there. I mean, you can hear the echoing of the talking. You can kind of sense people are out there, and you multiply that by 140 people out there. It would have been and that doesn't count the ships that are coming in, the people staying at the Tropical Hotel, or people staying at Egan's boarding house where John James Audubon stayed. It was a pretty elaborate setup for a small 11-acre island.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, Gail Butters has a question. What is the oldest artifact in the center, and is it displayed yet? And Aaron is, I think, gonna hand me that, or show that what we have. Our oldest artifact that we have is actually 7 or 8 million years old, and that is a petrified manatee. That's good. I think you guys can see that. That is a petrified manatee rib bone that was, I believe, brought up in a dredge operation off of the Southwest Florida and donated to us by our very dear friend. Thank you. Bill Losner, who always has something else he wants to share and donate, which is awesome. And so that is our oldest artifact by about 7 million years. And it is not, it's on exhibit in the Jerry Wilkinson Research Library. We have a small exhibit case for things that haven't made it out to our main floor yet. And one day I hope to get several of those items that we have in here out on display. But that is that's the oldest one.
Hi, Brad. This is Kate.
Hi, Kate.
Thank you so much for doing this. I've got a question for you.
All righty.
So with all of the uncertainty that we're all dealing with, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, you know, how the Keys has weathered storms before and industries that have boomed or gone bust in our Upper Keys history.
Well, we know that the Keys have suffered through several calamities, both of a natural and, in this case, you know, viral component. What the Keys have always been is resourceful and strong and resilient. With every industry, and there's been a lot of industries from West to Elliott Key that have, you know, wrecking, shrimping, sponging, cigar making, farming, which was a huge industry here in the Upper Keys. With every industry that waxes and wanes and disappears, something else always seems to pop up, and people find a way to persevere and to go, you know, and to further on, you know, and to keep moving on. I know between 1870, specifically in the Upper Keys, between 1870 and 1910 around, the Upper Keys were a farming industry, with pineapples being the primary cash crop. And through a series of hurricanes, 1906, 1909, 1910, there was what is referred to as a pineapple blight, which sounds more to me like all of that storm surge coming across in that salty water, kind of salting the earth and destroying, you know, and making what thin layer of fertile topsoil that we have on the islands, kind of ruining that for pineapples. And then as the pineapples disappeared, the key limes were not as affected, and the key lime industry kind of blossomed after that. Another thing that happened was when Flagler built his railroad. Flagler never intended to go just to Key West, but all the way to Havana. And as the train would go to Key West, it would then, those cars would be boarded onto ferries taken to Havana. And in Havana, those railroad cars were loaded up with you know, produce and products from Cuba, and Perrine. And Flagler charged for farming, for instance, Flagler charged a lower tax rate on foreign farming than on domestic. And the domestic farmers, pineapple farmers in particular, were unable to compete with the prices coming out of Cuba. And then after all the hurricanes, the Cuban pineapple market just exploded. But with every calamity, with every, you know, downturn, things get rough. In 1935, that, you know, Labor Day hurricane on September 2nd, you know, totally altered the face of the Upper Keys in particular, and the history and the future of the Upper Keys. And with every, you know, downturn, with every calamity, with every phenomenon that has occurred, something new pops up. So I know that the Keys are hurting now with because this has largely become a hospitality industry, a hospitality destination, and you know, people are hurting. It's going to, you know, things will not necessarily go back to normal, but go back to a sense of normal, and people will come back down, and it will rebound again. And it's just a matter of time and kind of waiting and hoping that we can, you know, continue, and the waters will still have fish, you know, they'll still be beautiful, and the snorkeling and the diving will still be wonderful. The restaurants will still serve great food and great drinks, and it'll still be a great place to come and relax. And when everyone's done getting their sun and their sunburn, they'll be able to come here to the Keys History and Discovery Center and learn some of the great history that we're working so hard, and all you guys out there are helping to, you know, to bring, and, you know, another element, another piece of culture, which is another way of showing how the Keys, you know, the Keys are growing. There's been such a growth in Islamorada and the Upper Keys in the last 10 years, such a cultural growth with the development of, you know, the Broadway Arts District, and with the Keys, the Dive Museum and our facility, and all the artists and all the breweries now coming up. We're really, you know, expanding it's a great place to come drink. It's a great place to come relax and fish, but it's also a great place to learn and enjoy some of what we have to offer. Yeah, Aaron's asking what other crops besides pineapples and key limes during the farming years, and it really is a surprising number of things that were grown. And pineapples, obviously, key limes, yes, tomatoes, huge tomatoes, cucumbers, onions, melons, yeah, grapefruit, lemon, oranges. I mean, it's really surprising that because there's so little topsoil here, and you don't think of the Keys as a farming, but up until really the 35 hurricane, this was largely a farming community. Robin, yes, thank you. Robin, unmute yourself.
Sorry, I'm new to all this too. Back to Indian Key, your favorite subject and mine. Do you know any more about, when I was researching my book, I could find nothing on Elizabeth Ann Housman that I could latch on to. So I kind of made up her character going by that Henry Perrine would not allow his family to associate with her. I know that Jacob stopped a lot in Charleston, so I just kind of added in my book that he stopped in Charleston and picked her up to have company in Indian Key, and she was a lady of the night. I don't think you've read it, but that's how I perceived her to be, and wondered if you had found any more information about where she came from.
I don't think you're totally off on the lady of the night kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Hausman would frequently go to Charleston.
Right.
So he would be back and forth there. I know one day he built this 2-story mansion on the island. A 2-story house is often described as a mansion. I'm not sure what dictates mansion. But he built the house, went to Charleston, and came back with her. I know that she was probably, I don't know what her role was in Charleston. They were never actually formally married.
Right.
There was no record of them actually being married. And after he was killed, she tried to gain possession of what was left, and she had no legal right to anything. And everything that he had left went to Abraham, Jacob's father. And I know that Ann Hausman ended up marrying a lawyer so she probably didn't, so it all probably turned out pretty well for her.
Right.
But I've never done any genealogy on her. There's probably, I'm not sure if you have, there's probably information out there. And that's one of those minor characters of Indian Key that probably has an interesting backstory that just hasn't been figured out yet.
It drove me nuts because I was digging and digging to try to find information on her, and I have access to Ancestry.com and could not find it. But I do have some information you might find interesting. The one thing I did find on the internet, she submitted a cocoon specimen to a fair in New York City, and to the American Institute for Judging sometime prior to the massacre. And she won a diploma, quote unquote diploma, for silk culture. It was in a newspaper article I found online in newspapers.com. So she did contribute a little bit, and she was interested in the silk culture like Perrine was, which was quite interesting, I thought.
Yeah, so probably while the Perrine children were not allowed to interact with her, I'm sure that Henry Perrine, and because one of Henry Perrine's principal crops was the mulberry bush.
Right.
Which was he developing, and the silkworms eat the mulberries, and then they sting the cocoons, and that's where the silk comes from. And he was introducing the mulberry bushes in Key Vaca and on Key Biscayne and other areas. That was one of his primary cash crops that he was trying to develop. So there probably was some, I want to use the word intercourse between the two.
Right.
Social intercourse or so they probably, because he was very big and he had lots of connections in New York. So I wouldn't be surprised if he told her where to or helped her,
Right.
because that would have been right up his alley.
Despite how he felt about her.
Well, we don't know how he felt about her because there's no record of that. All we know is that Mrs. Perrine didn't want her children dealing with her.
Associating with her.
Yeah, but we don't know anything about what he
What the problem was.
Yeah.
That's true. I have to use my imagination when I'm writing. Okay,
yeah,
I'm done.
Absolutely. Like Aaron was saying, it's not uncommon for a husband and wife to feel differently about a third party. So
Yes, yes. Okay, well, thank you.
you're welcome. Krista, are we in all my years? Oh yeah, no. My most memorable moments. I'm gonna go. This is more of a personal story. Probably my most memorable moment, besides seeing my wife for the first time, was how I came to Florida, which was something I wouldn't do as an older guy, but I was 24, I think, 25. I sold everything I had, bought a one-way ticket to Florida to Miami, with just a backpack and a couple $100 in my pocket, with no job, no friends, no car, no bicycle, no credit cards, and just came to Florida because I wanted to become a writer and live on an island. And that was really a life-altering thing for me. So I think that's the most memorable thing. You know, I'm freaking 55 years old now, and that story happened like 30 years ago. And I don't know why every time I tell that, I talk about that, I still tear up. And I don't know why that is. But another second most memorable thing I think for me was I was working at Bentley's restaurant in 2003. And Bentley's is no longer, it's on Upper Matacumbe Key. I remember Bentley's overlooks of the Overseas Highway. And I was sitting there, I was waiting tables, and I was polishing silverware, waiting for the shift to come up to start. And I'm going to say a white Jetta. It's not the right color or the car, I don't think, as my wife will tell me when I get home probably. But a car pulled in, a pretty blonde girl got out of the car and walked up. And about the same time people apply for a job. And I walked over to the manager. I said, if that girl applies for a job, please hire her. And we've been together for about 16 years now. Again, I'm not sure why I'm tearing up, but. All right, unmute yourself.
Brad, I'll help you out. Specific to being here at Keys History and Discovery Center, we've had, I think, a lot of memories, a lot of events over the years. Brad and I didn't know each other from Adam the first time we met, and kind of got thrown into the ring without knowing what to do. And we had blank blue walls and no furniture and no phone number. We had a P.O. box and a long name and a board, and we had to get to know each other. We had to create exhibits and interest in what we do. And it was scary and it was hard, and we figured it out. And with every new exhibit that went from, as Brad describes, photos duct taped to the blue walls with the little description attached, to when we first put in our first permanent exhibit, Legends of the Line, every milestone that we reached was a great, great achievement. But I think the most significant memory for me was 3 years ago, almost to the day, on May 13th, when we celebrated Ken Meeks's 90th birthday, and his late wife Dee's amazing contribution to our organization in the amount of $1 million. And what that allowed us to do, well, A, it saved us, because I can be as honest as possible. The day he said he was going to give us $1 million, we had about $8,000 in the bank, and I didn't know how we were going to continue doing what we were doing. So it was a little scary. That was very much a defining moment. But to be able to unveil the sign out front and celebrate with him and his wife and our supporters was a huge milestone day. That donation allowed us to pay down on some significant debt we incurred building our capital, our permanent exhibits, our theater, etc., as well as we used it for some operations. But better than that, we were able to establish an endowment, a stock endowment that was in the amount of $400,000. It's a little low right now because of the stock market, but it's building back up. But that gives us some long-term security. So May 13th, 2017 was probably my best memory of this place. And I really don't have any significant bad memories because I love working with my staff, my team. We are 3 very diverse skill sets and personalities, which is always fun. We have the best volunteers and docents and a great board. And we just get embraced by our members and our visitors, even when you just visit the first time. So it's all good. It's been a great journey. Thanks for asking, Chris.
Just to kind of follow up on what Jill was saying, I remember the very first time Jill and I ever met, we went to lunch, and this could have gone horribly and in a very different way. And one of the first things I told Jill was, I work best if I'm left alone to let me do what I want to do, let me do my thing. And a different boss might have reacted differently to that. And it was something that was, I mean, for us to have the trust in each other, be able to continue on and build and do what we've done has been really, really awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Brad and Aaron.
Yeah, does anybody else have any question or?
Hello, Brad.
Hey.
It's Ellen.
Hi, Ellen.
Talking about your favorite subject. So Terry wants to know, Indian Key, was it just, what was it an ownership at some point, or did he just show up there and then just take it over and just begin building on it?
By the time that Jacob Hausman showed up on the island was really 1830. The first building that was built on the island was 1824. Silas Fletcher and a partner, Joseph Prince, built a general store. They were commissioned by a couple of guys at Port Monroe, which was an early community on the kind of by Knight's Key, at the base of the 7 Mile Bridge. They hired, it was Joshua Appleby and Solomon Snyder kind of developed this small community called Port Monroe, and they hired Silas Fletcher, who was living at this community. His mission was to come to Indian Key, create a general store, and live there. So that was the first like white settler on the island, the first business. He built the general store. He also built a 2-story house that would ultimately become the Tropical Hotel. But in terms of ownership, nobody owned, the state or the government owned the island. These were all squatters basically who were just squatting, squatters' rights, and no one owned the island. I know when Hausman he invested a ton of money, but by the time that Hausman arrived on Indian Key, it was already a thriving community of over 50 people. There were lots of, there were turtlers and fishermen, and and some wreckers were already living there. It was already on its way to becoming it was already, I think in 1830, the population of Key West was about 500, which was, by far and away the largest community in the territory. Indian Key had about 50 people living on it about 1829, 1830. But even at that point, before Houseman came, there were several, 10 or so families living on the island. So it was already a pretty developed place. Houseman, that's one of the things they talk about Indian Key. Well, Houseman owned the island. Houseman never owned the island. After the attack on August 7th, what the military basically said to him was, we appreciate, after the attack, the military moved from Tea-Table Key and over to Indian Key and developed their Fort Paulding, their naval depot. And they basically told Houseman, hey, thank you for putting all your money, investing in the island and building it up and building the warehouses and building the piers and the wharfs. But, it's ours now, so thank you. We're the government and we're taking over because no one ever owned it. I know the rights to the island were bought and sold as if somebody owned it, but no one ever owned the physical. No. It went from the Navy. The Navy left in 1842 after the end of the second escalation of the Seminole War. There were several private owners. I believe Henry Flagler is like the first real owner of the island as far as a paper trail. I know the island was for sale, I want to say 1940 for like $800. I can see the newspaper clipping on my computer at home, but I can't remember the total number. But it was privately owned up until 1970 when the state of Florida purchased it. And then it became a state park in 1971, Florida Indian Key Historic State Park. Does that help, Ellen?
Yeah. Just another question. I wonder how long it took them to get a building permit to build that first
I
building.
believe it was about 30 to 45 seconds. Let's build something. Okay, it's done.
If only we could do that nowadays. Just one more question, Brad.
As many as you want, Ellen.
Tea-Table, the one that you spoke about, is that the one that Jim Terra owns now called Terra Key?
Absolutely, yeah. Tea-Table
Okay.
Key, Tea-Table Key is one of the historic names. Prior to that, it was called Umbrella Key. There apparently was a large tree on the end of the island that had a big canopy, so it was called Umbrella Key. It became Tea-Table Key after that, and then Jim Terra purchased it. I'm not sure when. I know it's for sale now, so if you have an extra $12 million on hand, you could buy it and make it your own island. But he named it Terra Key after his last name. But it's still Tea-Table Key historically.
And Jim Terra is one of our founding members, isn't he? How wonderful is that?
He's been a great supporter of ours. He's one of our charter members. Yeah, absolutely. And so we're thankful for all our charter members and all our contributors. And it's cool that with him being such a historic property, that he's been so generous with us as well. Does anybody else have Robin? If you have something else to ask, we got some time.
Well, I wonder how Jerry Wilkinson's doing. I actually, used his website quite a bit for my research for both Indian Key and Vindication Key. So I feel like, I'd like to make sure he's doing well. If you can talk about, just tell me if he's doing okay. I've never met him. I wish I could have met him.
It's still possible. He turns 91 this year, 92.
Wow.
In
Yeah.
I want to say September. Yeah, he turns 92 in September. He lives in a really cool house in Harry Harris Park that was part of the original planter community.
Mm-hmm.
His website is awesome. I spend there's so much great stuff on there, and he's been a great resource and a great help for me personally, and as well as here. And he's plugging along.
Well, I couldn't have, like I said, written both books without him, and I actually dedicated Indian Key to him. So, but I've never met the man.
Yeah, we call this the Jerry Wilkinson Research Library for a reason. You know,
Yeah,
we have a
I
lot of
got
his stuff here
I
that's,
got a tour of that by you before it opened, so I'd like to see it now. I need to come back.
yeah, Jerry is a great pack rat. He collected lots of things, and
Yeah.
we're so happy to have his collection and Jim Klepper's collection and so many others that are now in a safe, climate controlled area. And we have, you know, one of the he was a great he was he's a photographer as well, or used to have his
Right.
own dark room, so he has lots of access to pictures. And we've got all his photographs that are not, or all the pictures that he's collected, which these aren't really visible right now from this camera. I think Aaron's going to come over here, and so, you know, we have a lot of art. And when we first opened in 2013, his images were like all we had. So this is what I was basically duct taping up on the walls and telling stories with, because, you know, we wanted to have a museum. Okay, what do you have? You know, we have images. Let's tell stories.
So you're up in the museum then. You're up on the floor of his research library.
I'm sitting. This is it.
Ah,
this is where we're sitting from. Yeah,
okay.
this is where we are.
Very good.
And hold on. That's no, it hasn't opened the door and go in there. But I'm gonna take. Well, I don't have to take my microphone off. Ouch! Pardon my limp. Yeah, we have collected. Let's just kind of go. Let's go for me. We have boxes and boxes of materials that we have still not gone through
Wow.
of just documents and just it really is it's an amazing collection of not just Upper Keys and Florida Keys history, but Florida history.
Well, I need to come up there then. I'm in Cudjoe right now, so I'm gonna have to come up there to do some research.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not open yet.
No, I know,
Sadly,
and I'm.
but we have a great. It's an amazing facility. We have, you know, 2 floors of exhibit space. We have an amazing theater. We have this great library that we're developing that's going to be a work in progress for years and years to come. I mean, the library itself is a full-time job that, you know, we would love to have someone, you know, be able to spend, you know, 2 or 3 years going through everything and getting it organized.
Right.
And it's, you know, it's just this facility has so much to offer and so many things to you know, to do.
Well, I will
work here left to do.
I'll take advantage of it, but we're leaving in about 3 weeks, so it'll have to be on the return trip. But this is just our part-time home, so.
Well, we'll be happy to
get
as much information as we can for you.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Robin.
Thanks.
We have time for one more question. If anybody else is out there who Oh, all right. We have one. Patricia Corning is coming on now. Yeah. Well. No. Yeah. We have someone joining right now that we're going to give her a minute to log in, and then we'll get her answer questions answered. Yeah. Yeah, normally our program starts at 6, so there might have been a little bit of confusion there. But everyone who joined in today, thank you so much. This is not the last time we'll be doing this. I know with this COVID-19, we've had to really expand and learn on the fly and offer a lot of new programming. And now that we've developed a lot of these ideas, they're not going away, apparently. And so we'll be doing a lot more of these virtual things. This is a great way for me to interact and engage with our supporters and people who are interested in Keys history. And I'm always happy to answer any questions as I can. Patricia, do you have thanks for joining us. Do you have a question? Yeah, the program started at 5 o'clock, so we're winding down. So if Patricia, if you have a question you want to type in or ask, you can unmute yourself on your computer. Is that on the bottom lower left-hand corner? probably. If you tap that, you can unmute your microphone, and then you can ask your question, or you can go to the chat feature in the toolbar on the bottom, and you can type in a question. I want to make sure that we answer anything that you have before we wrap up for tonight. Thank you, Christina. Chris. Cheers. Oh, cheers. Virtual cheers. For the record, Presidente beer is the official beer of our Keys History Discovery Center curator. Yes, unless it's at the Night Museum when I love our Alma Mater Beer Company beer. All right. Patricia, I know you just logged in. I don't want to end this until you had a chance to ask a question. Yeah, and if you do have a question and we are disconnected, please shoot us a message on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or through our email. Yeah, which is curator@keysdiscovery.com. I'm thankful to have Aaron here prompting me on things I'm forgetting to say. Yes, it's all about teamwork. All right. All right, well, everyone, thanks so much for joining us. And again, this won't be the last time we do this. And tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, we will be doing another virtual exhibit tour of the downstairs. And then on Friday morning at 10 o'clock, our second edition of Field Trip Fridays, which we're going to talk about the founding of the original town site of Islamorada. Amazed to see how popular our first Field Trip Friday was. We've had over 12,000 views for that little talk that we shot at the Florida Keys Memorial, the Hurricane Monument, and we will see you on Facebook Live. Yeah, yeah. You go to Facebook, to our Facebook Live, our Facebook page. We have the live version of that where you can interact and ask questions. Otherwise, it'll be posted on our Facebook page. But also, we have a YouTube channel, the Keys History and Discovery Center, which has all our virtual programming, including our last three lectures. The one on Ed and Fern Butters. We have a great presentation on Florida Soul, a history of Motown music in Florida, and also one we did last week on Indian Key, but also our individual our virtual tours with myself and our aquarium biologist Blake Terry, talking about the marine laboratory aquariums and his work downstairs. So again, thanks everybody so much, and we will see you again soon. I'll be back on tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, and Friday at 10 o'clock, Monday at 1 o'clock, Tuesday at 10 o'clock, every day of the week.
Thank
Very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
Joe, next time we're going to have a question from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
Thank
Go
you.
home to that beautiful wife of yours.
I will. Fucking can't. Why that? I must be emotional. My period today or something like that.